And we will go. Okay. Hello and welcome to our ASQ Innovation Technical Community webinar for March 2024. You are in for such a treat tonight because we have the special Dr. Shaun Jamison, not only a legal expert, but a CIPP specialist focusing on this intersection of law, cybersecurity, electronic legal research, and this how ethics, a technology, and the law all intersect within this legal field. You are in for a treat because he has an extensive background, both being the former chair of the MSBA Practice Management and Marketing section, but also has worked extensively in the creation of legal curriculums, courses, not only teaching and leading at a, excuse me, at a deep level, but also being able to create the legal basis for the Concord and now the Purdue Global Law School focus, where he is the associate dean. Again, you can see his phenomenal background, cybersecurity, privacy, all of the technologies, instructional design, curriculum design, legal research, cyber law. So he has both the business experience, the legal experience, and the educational experience. So again, you are in such a treat for such a treat tonight. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our phenomenal Dr. Shaun Jamison, who will talk about innovation, AI, and the law, exploring the ethics intersection.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to share screen here, hopefully demonstrating that I actually do have some technical skills. All right. So that's our topic. And a little bit about me. If you were here early, if not, this will be the first time I'm saying this. I am not a technologist, so I really do take this from the point of view of, ethics and policy and law, as opposed to digging deep into the technology. So if you ask me those questions, you might stump me pretty quickly. One of the things that I did, in addition to all the great stuff that Rhonda shared that was so helpful, is that I'm currently teaching a artificial intelligence law course. And just for this group, since many of you are QA, my mom was a nurse and at one point became a quality assurance director. And I think at a time where there weren't very many of those, and worked very hard in her late career to learn about statistics and so on. So I have a great appreciation for what the quality folks do. A little bit about me. I really love science fiction, and I've consumed a lot of, killer robot stuff and AI goes wrong kinds of things. And I just want to share with you that, some of that in the minds of some experts are real possibilities. So there was a report that came out that was funded by the government that talks about an extinction level threat from artificial intelligence. And I want us to take that, just in case you read that and you're freaking out and, stocking up for doomsday. It's really a call to action rather than a prediction of doomsday. And the things that we can do to prevent an outcome like that have to do with ethics, regulation, and governance. And so we'll talk mostly about ethics tonight. And thank you so much for Dr. Rhonda Farrell and the Innovation Technology Community of the ASQ for the invitation tonight. It's much appreciated. All right, so tonight we'll talk briefly about regulation. We'll talk about the characteristics of the legal field with regards to technology, AI ethics, intellectual property issues, AI innovation, the legal arena, risks for lawyers with AI, and paving the way for AI innovation in the legal field. And of course, we'll have some resources at the end. Now, I should say one thing real quick. Since some of you might know a bit about artificial intelligence, some of what I'm talking about might technically be machine learning, and certainly not general artificial intelligence because that hasn't been created yet. So forgive me if I just call everything AI or artificial intelligence. So for the techie people out there. All right, well, let's talk about regulation. So one thing to know about the United States is this is true of many of our legal areas. It's a patchwork of state and federal laws. So we're a federalist country, which means that the states have the ability to create their own laws within their jurisdiction, subject to some limitations. And so anything that has to do with AI could be state or federal law. Some states won't have any AI specific laws yet. Some do. And there are a um, few things on the federal level that would apply. But just understand that it's complicated, and certainly if you've done compliance in a national or international company, you're already painfully aware of this situation. So one of the laws that applies is the Illinois CIPP. So it has to do with biometrics. And where the litigation is on this right now is voice and facial recognition. Now, this isn't the only thing it would apply to. It just happens in the workplace right now. People are suing over that, because people are not happy, obviously, about being surveilled in their workplace. And they're using this law to say, hey, you can't use these biometric measures without the proper safeguards and consent. So that's one law. And of course, that would only apply in Illinois. California has the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA, which also addresses somewhat what we call automated decision making, which is, we're really talking about AI again. New York City has a job decision making law. And one of the things you're required to do is conduct bias audits to make sure that when you're automatically rejecting somebody's application, that it's being done without unfair bias. So, here I said state and federal law, but this is actually a city law. So it gets even more complicated at times. The current administration has an executive order that's very comprehensive. If you're interested, I could spend the whole hour on it, but just know that it actually touches on many of the same topics we're going to talk about. You should be aware it exists. The European Union Act recently passed Parliament, and that has to do directly with artificial intelligence. So if you are only in the United States and only have customers here, not in Europe, or you're not processing data in Europe or doing anything in Europe, you can sort of ignore the EU Act, except that these acts tend to be first coming out of the EU, and they tend to be influential. So when the general data protection regulation came out, the GDPR, that really inspired some of the laws that are passed, around the world and in the United States. And I think they're very intentional in trying to make something that they feel will be the gold standard that other folks will want to enact as well. And one thing you should be aware of with AI is that generative AI makes it very possible to create really realistic images or videos that are a lot like the actual person they're mimicking. And they get better all the time. And so the risk is that this might be used, say, in politics, or this might be used to ruin somebody's reputation, or this might be used to defeat security measures. There's any kinds of things a person might use it for. It might be revenge porn, right? Fake revenge porn, and really, embarrass and damage people this way. So one of the things that states are doing is they're passing laws to address deepfakes, but they're doing it in different ways. Some of them only address the porn issue. Some of them address any use of your fake image. And one of them here in Minnesota, I'm actually from Minnesota, is actually dealing with political use of deepfakes. And we saw an example of that where somebody had Biden telling people not to vote. I don't know if it worked or not, but it was definitely not a good thing. And I'm sure there's going to be consequences for that. But understand that every time you have something really new, the legislators are pretty slow in taking it up and dealing with it, which is why it's important to know about existing laws that you might be able to find solutions to any kind of problems you have with AI. But ultimately, like deepfakes, it's such a unique and powerful thing that really does need specific legislation to deal with it. All right, let's talk a little bit about the legal field.
Jameson, we have one question come in.
Sure.
Somebody would just like to know if you could talk to the lineage of the laws just a little bit. Like, where did it stem? What did it stem domestically, or do you think it got kicked off in Europe?
Well, certainly, certainly looking at this as far as a comprehensive approach, that's clearly EU. I mean, definitely. Um, Usually California and New York are first in the game. So and by virtue of the using biometrics, Illinois was an early entrant of having a law of significance. But and you'll see that in a lot of areas that California and New York, obviously have many millions of people living there. So they tend to be a lot quicker to legislate. But you'll see different states, again, like Minnesota, for some reason felt very compelled to address the political aspect of deep fakes. So thank you for that question. So one of the things about the legal field, and those of you in the field might appreciate this a little bit, is we're kind of resistant to change. So Um, now I've been around a while, so when I started out in the early mid '90s as a lawyer, I was using a PC, which is great, right? That was relatively new technology from the '80s. And I was typing my own briefs, and I got chastised because lawyers don't type their own briefs; they dictate them into a recorder and then somebody else types them up for you. So you can imagine PCs have been out for at least a decade before that, right? But we're still saying nope, and we're still using word processors and doing things from dictation. So the legal field, for a variety of reasons, is pretty resistant. Typically not early adopters of pretty much anything. There are leaders, obviously, that have been trying for decades to lead the way to having the legal field do more technology, and we have had successes. But if you're not familiar with the area, this is just something you probably want to know, that there's a reasonable amount of resistance to change, and especially given that lawyers historically, at least the last 100 years or so, have been really tied to billable hours. So when you have a billable hours requirement, and that's how you measure your worth, stopping to learn new and different technology that might not pan out, in their minds, it's a tough sell. So when you're the Westlaw rep, for those outside the field, Westlaw's research tool, it's really hard to get the lawyers to come down and learn the latest tips and tricks on Westlaw, even though it's a core function of their jobs. So this is just one challenge, I guess. So a driving force for change in the legal field is consumer preference. So one of the things that consumers want, right? They want the easy button. Um, and I imagine you do too. I do. I want the easy button, right? Why do things have to be so complicated? So I think that's going to drive more legal field um, adoption of technology, and certainly competition for lawyers by non-lawyer owned businesses should also drive lawyers into technology. So you might be aware there's some companies that generate forms for you. You just put in your information and it generates a form. And in theory, that would help you with your legal rights. And it may or may not, but people like it because it's easy and it's convenient and it's automated. So I think that's really going to, that will hopefully is part of what overcomes that resistance to change. Another thing that's very important to know about the legal field is that many people do not have realistic access to justice, to the law in the way that is really helpful. So if you're looking specifically at folks who are below 125% of federal poverty guidelines, of those folks who have a legal problem and who qualify at that income level, there are about 10,000 of them for every 3 legal aid lawyers. So these are lawyers that take on these cases and they're paid through their agency, right? They're paid through legal aid, not from the clients. So you can imagine, if an oppressive load would be like 50 cases, how far those 3 lawyers would get. They get like 150 cases. They wouldn't be handling 10,000. So a lot of those folks just don't have access to the lawyers at that level. And we need to find alternatives or ways to multiply the effectiveness of a lawyer. So a tremendous number of people are in court without attorneys. So in some states, it's between 70 and 80% of family court participants don't have an attorney. It's really shocking because it's not easy to represent yourself, and it can be very complex, and it's hard, almost impossible to be objective, right? Which is your best outcome is if you have somebody who's objective. So this creates 2 problems. One, person isn't getting the help they need, and 2, whether it's their fault or not, they're gumming up the courts, and so things take longer in the courts than need to and cost more. Additionally, there's an access gap for the middle income people. So now they're not qualified for legal aid, yet they still can't afford a lawyer. So a lot of people, and especially in lower middle income, really couldn't afford a lawyer for much anyway. Maybe for some preventative work, and I certainly hope you'll consider that, doing that preventative work, because it saves tens of thousands of dollars later. But they also can't afford it. So really, technology like AI can help us get in there and help people function and avoid problems and deal with problems when they get there. So here's some longstanding uses of AI, despite our resistance to technology. Contract management is handled with the use of AI and other technologies, which is fantastic. If you're a large corporation, imagine having thousands of contracts, and they come due at different times, and you want to make sure that they have clauses are at least as identical as you can get them. to standardize the clauses so that for your business, you know, for this particular clause, it uses this language so that you have uniformity across your business. And that you know when they're going to renew, and you know what the life cycle of that renewal negotiation is so that you can start it at the proper time. And AI can help you with that. Document review. So way back when, control data, which I don't think exists anymore, was involved in litigation, and they decided, hey, we got to systematize all these documents that we get in our discovery requests for litigation. And so they hired many humans and made them basically hand go through and document what's in each document, categorize them, do all that stuff. You know, how important are they? What do they address? Everything. Well, at some point, right, we all started using everything electronically, and there really weren't a lot of paper documents anymore, which really helps with doing electronic discovery, right, and running it through a computer. But even at that, you still have tons and tons of duplicate documents. So if I have a request and I say, I want all emails pertaining to this subject, and somebody sent it to every person in the company, you're going to get a copy for every person in the company. That's a lot of work and a lot of money. And wouldn't it be great if AI could just identify what all the duplicates are? So only need to look at one, or prove that specific people saw that message, or whatever your goals are. And even if something's worded a little differently than your keywords, the AI can figure out this is probably something you'd also like to see when it's searching through millions of documents, decide which ones human beings should review. So it's very powerful. And of course, you know, you're probably using Grammarly or something like it right now to improve your writing. In the legal field, we have WordRake as well, which is a wonderful tool. So you might not even be aware, like when you're using, anybody use Google Compose, you know, that's run, you know, it's run by AI. It's anticipating what the end of that sentence is. Sometimes it's very wrong, sometimes it's comical, but sometimes it's really helpful. And I have to admit, every once in a while, I just accept what it says just to see if anybody notices I'm using the default. Haven't been called out on it yet, but now I'm kind of giving myself away. All right, let's talk a little bit about AI and adopting it in the legal field. So document review, at least as far back as 2012, Technology Assistant Review, TAR, was approved for use in court. Case Text is a great research assistant tool. I don't want to get too far into it just because it's a commercial product, but it's pretty neat, and it's been out there a long time. Got bought up by Thomson Reuters. In 2014, Ross Intelligence started. Unfortunately, got involved in litigation. Is now out of business, but that was a neat product as well. The HHS started doing contract review in 2018, IRS 2017, sorry, 2018. And then fast forward to today, or last year, several lawyers have relied on ChatGPT for their briefs and never checked the citation to see if the case was for real or it said what ChatGPT said it was. Now, this is embarrassing on numerous levels, but it's just as far as the ethics go, because this actually does violate our ethics code for lawyers specifically. Lawyers are responsible for the supervision of any lawyer's staff, or in this case, programs that they're relying on, right? They can't say Westlaw maybe do it or ChatGPT maybe do it. They're responsible for checking it out. And I just think it's amazing because the first person that got caught doing this, who was national news at a minimum, and then another person did it, and another and another. And so even if you're not in the legal field, please read the disclaimers when you're using AI products, because they're right there. and it says information might not be correct. You know, and there are ways, and again, not to get too far into technology, to limit hallucinations, but not necessarily to completely eliminate them when you're using generative AI. In other forms of AI, it's definitely possible to limit them greatly. Um, all right, and then 2023 AI gave what appeared to be a passing bar exam. So that's very concerning, and of course, kind of undermines the whole, well, what are we doing with this bar exam thing? But that's a different seminar. All right, and now many tools are using AI or they're being developed. So it's very exciting. Obviously, there's lots of opportunities to learn these tools, to work at these companies, to advise people and train people on how to use them. For instance, Wesson and Lexis are coming out with their own AI or generative AI. I should say they already had AI, they were already using it, but now they're getting into generative AI.
Couple
Right,
questions.
so
You
go,
please.
yeah, go for it.
And thank you. There's two. One is kind of the guardrails that you mentioned before. Is there any way an attorney or firm can be assured that AI has not misperceived the context, i.e., in a contract or in documents?
That is an excellent question. Yeah, well, you can greatly through training greatly eliminate the possibility, or greatly reduce is the right word. Um, so there's always a possibility of error, but you know the good news I think for these products like the document reviews, they've been out there a long time. So what I would do is I would take that question to whatever vendor of document review and ask them, you know, what is the accuracy, and you know what kinds of stopgaps or guardrails do you have in place to flag anything that might be questionable. But you're dealing with a much more limited universe when you're doing document review. So you're looking at one contract, and then you're looking at a database of provisions across. So I think given that, um, it's probably much less likely than what you'd see on ChatGPT. Or I shouldn't use their name, right? It could be any generative AI.
Thank you. Now we have one more, and they just want to get a better understanding for those attorneys whom harnessed AI maybe incorrectly. They want to understand what are the legal penalties. You know, you mentioned there's an ethics issue. What's the legal penalties around those AI violators for their case citations, etc.?
Yeah, so again, it really depends on context, but if you're in litigation, which means you're actually presenting these documents to the court, so there's an ethical obligation or canon to what they call candor to the court, which means that you're being honest. And when you submit a case that's not real to the court, you're not being honest. So as far as the attorney themselves, their license is in some kind of jeopardy, right? They might get a private warning or public warning, or if it's, you know, they have a lot of other violations, maybe a suspension or something for doing that. So that has to do with your license. But there's also a standard, you know, that Rule 11 in the Rules of Civil Procedure, and some states have a statutory version of this as well, that says that when you sign pleadings, you're saying they're true and accurate. And so if you sign a pleading that says it's true and accurate, you've cited to a case that doesn't exist, you're subjecting yourself to attorney's fees and costs, which, you know, the costs could be awarded to the court and the attorney's fees could be awarded to the other side, because they have to look up your bogus cases and prove they're not real, you know, which is really bad manners at a minimum, but also, you know, you can end up it could end up costing you dollars that you have to pay to the other side and to the court. And in theory, if it was a really bad situation where it was repeated behavior or very, very obnoxious, it could be additional sanctions where maybe you wouldn't be allowed to file until somebody else reviewed your work, or maybe you actually lost the motion because of what you did, or some other, disadvantageous order. So yeah, definitely not something you want to do. And interestingly enough, the only thing new about this is generative AI. So these aren't new rules. You were always required to make sure those cases were real and said what you said they said, and that they were still good law and all of those things. So it's just a matter of context that's changed and the ease at which you can make a mistake. But you always had that obligation. You should never be citing to a case you didn't actually read. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Dr. Jamison. Yes, and then one question is just your bullet point on the slide. They're just saying, could you add a little bit of context for them so you can help them understand what that means in terms of business for lawyers?
Okay, sure. Oh yeah, on this one. Okay, so this was actually talking about this is the opportunity for people who are selling to lawyers. So I guess looking at it from a lawyer's point of view, you can't give people money if you're not making money. So I think what it says is, the legal field is strong. There's a lot of money available to be made for lawyers if you can get to the clients and get the services done. And that's why I think technology is so important, because when we were talking about that gap, especially for the middle income people, um, they have money to spend. They just don't have enough money to spend. So if you can use technology to become more efficient so that either they're doing some of the work or the work is being done by AI, or AI is educating them or making your office have lower overhead so you can charge less, all of these things, or making you super efficient so you can charge more because you're more valuable. However you want to look at it, that's what's driving that. So that's just showing how much people are investing in the legal technology market. And I think it's a very good sign that people are interested, that they think there's possibilities there. Interestingly enough, um, the legal technology spend was a little bit less, or projected to be a little bit less in 2024 than 2023, but that might just be a maturation of the field where people have gotten in, and some of them are doing quite well, and others are unfortunately exiting the market, and so there'll be a little churn there. But I think still very strong. Um, I think this one is interesting. So 73% of lawyers expect to be using generative AI in 2024. I'm surprised again. So this is kind of undermining my point of view that lawyers resist change. But watch this next one. 15% are now using generative AI. So what they're saying is about, what is that? Like almost 50% more people are going to start using it within this year. So that's astounding if true. But the next one I think is even funnier. Sorry. Little commentary from me. All opinions are my own and not my employer or ASQ's. So 68% of lawyers feel prepared for AI. I think they're not. I don't believe this at all. But this is what they said on a survey. 73% report they understand how AI applies to their work. Again, I think people are fooling themselves. So, and I think that's a lot of opportunity for people who really want to learn this. want to learn about AI, want to learn about AI for whatever field, doesn't matter, legal or otherwise, you're going to have an advantage, I think, because there are a lot of people that really haven't put any time into this at all at this point. So the more you put in, the farther ahead you're going to be.
One more question, please, Dr. Jamison, on that part, and that's you mentioned that the attorney needs to review and kind of and signs, basically attest to their oversight, their due diligence. So a person is asking, is it, if the attorney still needs to do that with that amount of rigor, or is there really efficiencies in using AI? Is it easier almost to your point to go back to drafting it by scratch or to use templates?
Yeah, so it's you have to think about the best use cases for AI and particular AI products. So using, like, I use Grammarly. I love it. So I don't own any stock in it, I promise. It just helps you with your writing, and it uses artificial intelligence. Um, Absolutely, I recommend you use grammar checkers, right? I mean, that's going to add to your efficiency and your effectiveness. Do you have to supervise that grammar checker to make sure it's not making your sentence sound stupid or mean something different than what you intended? Absolutely. I don't care how good it is. You need to supervise it. You need to make the choices. Um, for research specifically and writing, um, honestly, there are very powerful tools like Westlaw, Lexis, Bloomberg, um, that do a far better job of legal research than any of the ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, right? I mean, they just do. So I don't know at this point why I would use a generic um, meant for everybody AI product to do that. There'll be specific legal ones that might be using some of the same data, but be more honed in for legal. That might be a better use case. But there's lots of other things that AI can do for you when you're writing that memo or that brief. It can help you draft an outline. It can help you identify issues. It can um, it can critique your writing. It can do a lot of stuff. So there's nothing wrong with using AI. Probably not really worth using it at this point. Um, the generic, trained on pretty much everything in the universe, generative AI isn't a great research tool for lawyers. There's better tools, and Google would be better, honestly. But still, no matter what tool, you're still responsible for making sure that it actually says what you think it says. Um, so I hope that helps. So I think it is you can use it and it can be very helpful, but I don't like using generative AI to draft a first draft, because it's a lot of work to rewrite it. I like using it to create an outline. I like using it to critique my work. I think that's probably in writing and certainly to correct my grammar and misspellings and things like that. And of course, that's all as of today, right? So a great product comes along tomorrow and everything changes. So that's um and some of it's your preference, but I find rewriting things to be very time consuming, if I didn't write it in the first place. All right, let's talk about privacy. So we kind of already started off on this. We were talking about regulation, but just keep in mind that even though we're talking AI, all those existing laws through the sector still apply. So HIPAA for health information, Graham Leach Bliley for financial, FERPA for education, GDPR if you happen to be in the EU or processing data in the EU or dealing with EU citizens. And the CIPPA deals with children under the age of 13 across the United States. And the and the GDPR has a similar one that defaults, I think, to 16. Just realize that a lot of laws apply to AI, regardless of whether they specifically mention it or not. So one of the ethics issues for privacy is people using your private data or other people's private data for training the AI. So in theory, it's just training it, right? So it's not actually storing that information and then outputting it. But the challenge is it could. I've been calling it regurgitation. I forget if there's a better term for it. But at times, the AI, generative AI, will actually remember and regurgitate some of its training data a little too close to real life. So there's always a risk of that. So it's questionable to use private data, especially if there's no consent. Now, one of the amazing things about AI is that it can re-identify anonymized data. And so what I mean by this, it's frightening and alarming also, but very powerful. So what happens is, so I have a bunch of private data. And in order to protect people, I eliminate all the parts of the private data I don't need, right? So maybe I only have 3 data points left. That's what I absolutely need to do my research. And I assign everybody a number that can't be traced to their name except for, my secret key. Or maybe not even then. Maybe it's completely anonymous. And now I feel like it's super safe, right? I've protected people's privacy. Wouldn't you know, AI can marry up that anonymized data with public records and figure out with some degree of accuracy many of the people who are associated with that private data that I so diligently protected. So it's a very powerful tool. So something to think about when you're thinking, well, they said my data was protected. It might not be. And similar to that is AI can overcome redaction. So you might be familiar with documents have big black lines through them. And so what they did is they said, okay, well, you can have this document, but you can't have this because it's confidential or it's proprietary, it's top secret, whatever it is, you can't have it. Well, AI can look and figure out from context what's contained in those redactions. Now, it's not 100% accurate, obviously, but it can be very accurate. So again, it's a concern, right? I think I'm only giving you so much information, but I'm actually giving you pieces for you to figure out the rest of it. So just a technology tip, nothing to do with AI. But if you just highlight something in black on Adobe, people could just unhighlight it and then your redaction didn't take. So just so you know, a little practice tip there. And of course, we talked about regurgitation of data too close to the original. All right, any questions on that before I proceed? Okay.
One,
Go ahead.
one thing, Dr. Jamison, they just wanted, this one person made a note about the power of AI for pattern recognition, especially in fraud cases such as RICO. And I guess just a comment, or if you have any background in that, sir.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's a great point. That's the one time when it's not annoying to get a call from your credit card company, right? When their program spots something that looks unusual, and you get that automated call that says, "Are you actually in the Bahamas right now, Dr. Jamison?" So, yeah. and yeah, pattern recognition and doing fascinating things with DNA. Um, yeah, and certainly RICO, trying to find a pattern to create a web to figure out there is in fact a criminal organization. So yeah, lots of excellent use cases, I think. So I hope I'm not creating this is all negative, but I'm trying to give both sides of this, certainly. So so AI makes decisions about us. That's one of the bonuses. One of the great things about AI is that it doesn't currently have feelings, right? It can simulate feelings, but it doesn't have feelings. It's not capable of having feelings. And sometimes when we're making decisions about people, we have feelings, right? We have biases. We might not even be aware of them, but we have them. And so that's what's great about AI. But there are always problems. So let's talk about the black box. So when you're flying an airplane, they have what they call the black box, and that's the recording of everything that happens in the cockpit. And unfortunately, when the plane crashes, nobody knows for sure what happened until they can get into that black box to find out. It's secure. So in AI, by its nature, it's learning. So it's kind of hard to know 100% for sure why AI makes all of its decisions, but there are ways that we can help. One thing is, of course, we can design the AI to have some kind of output that lets us know what criteria it looked at. So some transparency about the criteria and explainable results. So that when somebody says, "Why did you deny my credit?" Well, it probably should have like a top 2 or 3 reasons, right? So we want to be able to have it at some level explainable without having to give up the algorithm, right? Because that belongs to you. That's your proprietary information. You would rather not give that out because your competitors will get a hold of it, or people start reverse engineering that great product that you created. Um, the other thing is consent. Did I agree that a computer can make a decision about me? I'd much rather have a human do it. And so in some jurisdictions, like in Europe, I have an opt out. I can say, I don't want AI, automated decision making, to make this decision about me. And of course, we want people to disclose the use of AI. So this is kind of a tricky one, right? Because you want people to disclose use of it. At some point, that'll be completely unnecessary, right? Because everything will be AI and we won't care anymore. But we're in a transition right now. And so to keep people's confidence, we should be honest about that we're using AI. We should also be honest about when we're not using AI. So somebody got fined like $300 million or some crazy amount like that because they made false claims about the level of AI use that they had. Another person got in trouble because they claimed they're using chatbots when in fact they were using humans posing as chatbots. And that was unfair or deceptive trade practices. So, be honest both ways, right? Using AI, not using AI, just be honest. Avoid a fine, avoid a lawsuit. All right, well, let's talk about, we touched a little bit on training data. Um, so some of the early, like OpenAI, they just went to the internet. They didn't ask anyone. They just went and they scraped everything, just like everything, dumped it in a pile and trained the AI on it. A lot of that was copyrighted. And you can imagine people are upset and they're suing and they're not winning so far. Um, so, so, but do you want to get sued when you're a business? No, right? That's a lot of money. You'd rather not do that. So what some of them are doing now when they're training is they're licensing or getting people's consent to use their data for training data. So you might notice when you're using a product like ChatGPT, if you go into the settings, you can actually turn the training data off so that your stuff is not going into the training data. Of course, it can't remember anything, so it doesn't really learn from you. That's the challenge. But you're then protecting your data from becoming part of the bigger picture of things. So you have to be very careful, especially legal and medical, anywhere you're dealing with confidential information, that it not become part of external training data. It's not so bad if it's your captive GPT, you own it, you have it secure, then you might be able to put confidential data in there with proper safety protocols. Got to make sure that the data that you trained on is accurate. That goes without saying. And that you're dealing with your bias in what you picked to be in the training data. That it's representative of the people who will be impacted by whatever product you're creating. So the benefit of AI is that it doesn't have emotion, right? It only has the biases that you input into it, right? Whether you meant to or not, by how you selected the training data or how you created the algorithm, all those kinds of things. So examples of why this would be a problem is if you train, so there are products that do facial recognition and they proctor tests, and what they've shown is that they probably, I can't say for sure, but they're probably mostly trained on people with lighter complexions, and people with darker complexions the AI doesn't recognize as well. So because there was a lack of representation, the AI facial recognition does not work properly. So when you're creating or when you're doing the training data, you have to be very careful about representation and any biases built into the system. So the algorithms, of course, accuracy, right? We actually want to get the result that we wanted, right? Fitness for purpose. So for example, they did a early experiment where they ran all the members of Congress against a database of criminals. They identified quite a number of congressional delegation as criminals. So, make of that what you will, but, they said it was not accurate. So you have to be concerned that police don't overreact to anything, that they find on an AI, like facial recognition or voice recognition or something like that, that they find more than that before they proceed with a search warrant, unless they can demonstrate high level of accuracy. Again, when people are developing these algorithms, when they're developing these products, do they have ways to correct for bias? Do they have representation from folks that are likely to be impacted by this product? So an example of bias is if you had, say you were doing, you were going to have the judge be advised by AI on what sentence the judge should give out. Well, if you looked historically at sentences, and those sentences were based on bias of the individuals who were giving the sentences at the time, if you didn't correct for that, you would be projecting past mistakes, past bias into the future. So you have to correct for it, or you have to clean up the data. You have to account for it somehow. Again, we already talked about transparency. We have to have, security is very important, obviously. So we want to secure that data. So if I have data, either training data or data that the AI is working with, we want to make sure that's protected. Anytime you're designing something, you want to make sure that the key components like security and privacy and things like that are part of the design from the beginning, since you don't have to spend a whole bunch of money and aggravation trying to bolt something on. Internet of Things. Okay, this is the killer robot problem, right? You don't want somebody hacking into the thermostat at your factory, right? You don't want them hacking into your self-driving car. You want these things to be secure. And you certainly want your AI that's controlling them to be secure. Obviously, you don't want somebody messing with your decision-making AI either. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about, some of the challenges of AI is that we're talking about workforce displacement. So the estimates are, pretty significant. It could be, and at one time we were kind of thinking, well, maybe it's only blue collar. And another time we were thinking maybe it's only knowledge workers. And now we're realizing it's really blue collar knowledge workers and professionals are all potentially displaced, at least task wise, right? At least some of your tasks are going to be outsourced to something that's AI enabled. So could there be certain jobs that are greatly reduced? Yeah, that is a possibility. Or some jobs that change, dramatically. Like, I don't think we're actually, given we're very, very short the number of lawyers, what we really need are an ability to operate less expensively or for people to make more money, right? So we don't actually need fewer lawyers, we just need more efficient lawyers. And so AI is actually probably a good thing overall for the legal field. And there'll be new positions. Yeah, and there'll be positions for people that are well qualified to operate in the AI world. And that's why retraining is so important. So look to the government, look to corporations and organizations and nonprofits, or look to yourself to retrain. And I'll give some resources at the end. So again, don't panic, right? Oh, okay. Yeah, Keisha says new positions for lawyers. Well, certainly, one that comes to mind right away is training other lawyers on how to use it effectively. Um, and I think, what might go away are those entry-level jobs. I think there'll be fewer true kind of grunt work jobs for lawyers and, for better or for worse. Lawyers will need to get up and running and get into the more difficult intellectually parts and judgment oriented, risk oriented parts of the job sooner. So I think, some of the jobs are training and retraining lawyers in AI, certainly, managing e-discovery, managing contracts, ethics advising, lawyer technology, legal legal project management, things like that. Okay, let's talk about the environment. And of course, when I first started looking at AI, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I wasn't really thinking about the environment, but holy cow, it's important and relevant. AI uses, let's say, ChatGPT uses, I think 4 to 6 times on average more power than a Google search. So if you really are just happy with the Google search, just do a Google search, you'll be fine. And it uses water to cool the computers, right? So it's using power and water. So that's kind of the downside. The other downside is electronic waste. Computers use a lot of, rare minerals and metals. And you need to make sure that that is actually recycled and doesn't become waste. On the plus side, it can solve and manage resource issues, like where do you water, where do you use pesticide, what kind of crops do you plant, that kind of thing. And we concern, as far as the ethical question, will the AI as designed prioritize one group over another? for the environment. In other words, well, we think we've solved this, X problem, and then it turns out, this one group's going to not have any place to live. Well, that's not a very good solution then. So we worry about those kinds of things with AI. And, similar to that is the equitable impact and access. So, will small companies and countries have access to these great fancy new tools? How are we going to make that happen? How about less powerful people or poor countries or less powerful countries? Will they be affected differently by the use of AI because they don't have a voice in the development or use of it in the same way that a wealthy or powerful country could? Now, there were a couple of people that were interested in intellectual property, so I should talk about this. I see I'm running out of time, so I'll speed it up. So they have we talked about the use of copyrighted work in training data. Right now, nobody's winning those lawsuits. Not saying it can't happen, because the New York Times is suing, right? They don't weigh in unless they think they got a shot. But right now they're not winning. We talked about the possibility of regurgitation or output being too similar to copyrighted work, meaning I say, draw me a cute mouse that's kind of round and has big ears, and it gives me exactly Mickey Mouse. Well, if I print that out and hang it up, and try to sell it, I'm going to get sued, even though I didn't mean to create Mickey Mouse. The computer did it. So that kind of leads to the next question of, well, can they identify me? And some of these platforms are actually saying, yes, we will protect you. If our tool creates a copyright violation, we will protect you. Speaking of protection, if a non-human, meaning AI, creates something, there's no copyright or patent protection for it under current law. So here's the innovation thing, because the Copyright Board said, look, we'll protect the parts of your creation that you actually created. So Adobe came up with a tracking software that can tell the difference between what you did and what the AI did so that you can get that protection. Now, there's some nuances there, right? Like, maybe if a compilation of AI works and the compilation itself is protected, even though individual works aren't or something, but that's a whole nother seminar. But just be aware, there's possibilities there. So what can AI do for the legal field? Train associates, fantastic. Onboard clients. Again, we're trying to save some money here so that we can deliver services at a lower cost or a greater speed and greater accuracy. Conflict de-escalation. So think eBay, right? You have a problem with somebody, you send your thing into eBay, it sends you a solution. It's kind of opaque. You don't know how it happened, but it either gave you a refund or it didn't, right? People are trying to say they have robot lawyers. The trick is not to tell people it's a robot lawyer, because then the bar association will get upset. So if I was going to have a robot lawyer, I would say it's a research assistant or something for a non-licensed person to go to court. So I'm representing myself if I'm not a lawyer, and I have this app that'll help me do what I need to do in court. I think the problem and why the bar association got upset is we marketed as a robot lawyer. And they're concerned about what that would do to the public, right? If they think it's actually a lawyer and not just a helpful program. Certainly knowledge management, certainly, critiquing and double checking your work and managing cases. Risks, hallucination we talked about. Drift is where the programming stops working as well as it had been, and that can be corrected through programming. Lack of supervision, we talked about already. Definitely not want to use confidential information. We talked about that we don't have as much grunt work to train associates on, so hopefully we'll use AI to train associates to combat that. And ironically, the public often seems to would rather use ChatGPT or Bard or whatever instead of lawyers. Well, one, because it's free, and two, because it's easy, even if it's horribly unreliable, to solve their legal problems. So not advisable, but there it is. Workforce reduction, greater efficiency, certainly a risk. So ways forward, training people to understand AI, promoting AI to assist legal aid, finding ways to provide AI legal assistance that is safe and accurate. And of course, off-the-shelf solutions people definitely have and definitely are developing for smaller mid-sized firms. And influencing industry leaders to embrace past two positive uses of AI. So what about takeaways for everybody? Ethics, regulations, and governance can hold off problems, even including that extinction event. AI is a huge opportunity, but it's not the solution for every problem. Sometimes a simple program is just fine. And you should build AI to work from the start with ethics and privacy and addressing bias and addressing representation. And of course, update your AI competence as soon as possible, please. And encourage your organizations to address AI. If you don't have a policy, if you don't have training, ask them why. And be aware the law and the use is evolving. So what I said today might be different tomorrow. And here's some references for you, including ASQ had a webinar that was, I think, a little more technical about AI. So if you were not as excited about the ethics and the legal part, but wanted to learn some technology, there's an opportunity for you. And there's some classes, some of these are free that you could take to learn more about AI. And I'm happy to take any questions as we have time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jamison. Yes, we put that in the chat. We're waiting for that. How about we'll lead off with one, Dr. Jamison, out of this entire, spectrum of information that you've given us tonight, for maybe looking forward over the next year, what's the one thing that you would advise maybe a new attorney who hasn't used these tools to think about, their approach, etc.?
Well, I think the main thing is just to play with it. Obviously you need to be informed, right, about the limitations, but just think about a task that you want to do. You could do a quick Google to get instructions, or internet search, I should say, to not violate the copyright. And get the instructions, get some help in doing that task and experimenting to see, hey, is that actually something that I'd like to do online? I'll give you an example from a professor point of view. So I have a class where we want to do a sample intake, and you have to do a conflicts check to see if your new client has a conflict with an existing or past client. Now, in the old days, I'd have to figure out a bunch of names, occupations, addresses, affiliations, all this kind of stuff. Now I could just tell ChatGPT what the parameters are, and it creates it for me in seconds. So you think about what that might look like for you in practice, or what that might look for you as a quality manager. To think, okay, what can it do that would save me a bunch of time? Data analysis or creation of an outline or anything like that. A simple function for a lawyer is to put something you wrote and just ask ChatGPT or Bard to evaluate it. Give me some feedback on this. I'm writing a letter. Tell me what you think. This is my demand letter. Do you think this is effective as a demand letter? And it'll tell you what it thinks. You don't have to accept it, but it'll tell you.
I think we had one more question come in. Give me just a second to get over there. Let's see. Do you recommend new attorneys seeking CIPP certification if interested in practicing cybersecurity law? There you go.
Yeah, I think I really like going through that process. The price did go up, so it's like over $600 or something now. So it's not cheap to get the initial certification. But what I recommend people do when they're thinking about career stuff, go to the job ads for the jobs that you're interested in, see what they ask for. I think you'll see that a lot of them are asking for some kind of certification for privacy. Yeah. So yeah, I'd recommend it. You know, it may be that you'd rather wait until later in your legal career or later in your law school career. So it kind of depends on what works best for you. But the CIPP is particularly suited to lawyers because a lot of the information that you're being tested on, you already know.
Well, fantastic. Dr. Jamison, we want to just give you a big hoorah tonight for ASQ Innovation TC. Just thank you so much for this phenomenal discussion with regard to the intersection of innovation, AI, technology, legal, and ethics. And we can't wait to hear about all of the great things that you're doing with AI going forward. So thanks again for being our wonderful guest speaker tonight, sir.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Yes, so on behalf of the innovation technical community, our chair, Ms. Rebecca Mott, our secretary, Ms. Jackie Jolly, our immediate past chair and treasurer, Mr. Larry Miller, that is officially a wrap for our March 2024 discussion. We invite you to talk to our chair, Ms. Rebecca Mott. You can reach her at rmott@memberleader.asq.org to find out more about our phenomenal technical community or to understand how you can volunteer or fill out an interest survey so we can follow up and see how we can engage with you going forward. We invite you to our My ASQ Innovation TC portal where you can find out more about our organization, engage in a discussion with our prior guest speakers and topics of innovation and quality excellence. You also gain access to our prior ASQE insights on excellence research and the discussions with regard to technology, innovation, etc. And last but not least, we invite you to our upcoming next webinar event on the 25th of April. We invite you to attend and listen to Dr. Rippy Singh say, why not? Start with why not, or how about, or what if? A discussion on many facets of innovation. Again, this is Dr. Rhonda Farrell signing off for the innovation technology community, and we welcome you back on the 25th of April, and so hope that you enjoyed your session with Dr. Jamison tonight on the intersection of AI and the legal field. Good night, everyone.